Hi everybody. I'm gonna be in full wine ant mode tonight, full goth wine ant mode tonight. This is what I've selected to enjoy during the viewing. This is a I picked this out because I thought the label was pretty, but I really liked it, so I bought another bottle. It's more on the sweet side, and hopefully it won't get me too drunk. I have to go slow. But a, a cozy hangout with me would not be complete without me in full wine amp mode. I'm doing that the fancy way because I'm on camera. Otherwise, I would do it much more messily. Let's make sure I can do this without making a mess or breaking something. So has anyone else in the audience seen this talk before? Or seen any of my other talks? Which ones have you seen, Anna Marabella? Okay, well, not only will you get to see a full one right now, but you'll get it with the my commentary track, and then Friday is, of course, Dana's version of my Deathloop talk. Ah, cool. Yeah, I have a lot of fun with that talk. It's exciting and satisfying to revisit it one last time and give it that extra layer of polish, and also take my time when I'm presenting it. Being on a time limit is it's cool. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's definitely cool, but it adds just a little bit of extra stress to the whole thing, to know that I've got to like hit certain time marks as I'm explaining things. So every time I feel like elaborating a little bit more on a subject, I'm stealing time from future me, and it's a little tense. So I won't have to deal with that today or Friday. I'm definitely gonna have to deal with that with my add-on talk, which is in April, late April. It's in Rennes, in Bretagne. I hope I'm saying that right. Okay, we're at four after. I'll wait 1 minute longer. It looks like we've got 14 people with us, which is totally enough to get started. But okay, it's five after. Shall we get going? Shall we dive in? Now, I want to just let everyone know that if I start to like tease and mock my younger self, this is all done in good fun. I'm not like being mean to younger me. It's just a gentle roast, so please don't worry about it. I might be a little critical or nitpicky, but that's not something that bothers me. Like I don't get into any type of like, beating myself up cycle. It's more like, oh, note for future self, don't do that anymore type thing. Okay, let's get started. So there's going to be a little bit of music at the start, and yep, everything looks right. Let's go. Yeah, hopefully I won't mess this up. Did a You can all hear the music, right? Hello, and welcome to my talk. Great Level Design is a studio-wide effort. My name is Dana Nightingale. I was born in the US and in the United States, and very shortly after that. So I mentioned earlier, like before we officially went live, that the time pressure was a big deal doing these. This was my first time doing a talk. And not only was there this element of time pressure of you have this time slot, but the way I had to do this was This recording was for the GDC version. And that year, the way you submitted your talk was you don't have like your time slot that you like go live during GDC. You pre-record it and submit it to them, and they play it during that time slot. But not only do you pre-record it, you have to pre-stream it to them, and they're recording it, and then it vanishes into the ether. So there was no way to actually review it before the talk. So it's like I've got to do it in exactly 60 minutes. I've got to do it in one take, and I can't review it afterwards. So that's why I'm so nervous during this presentation. And that's why there could be these funny little moments where I'll correct myself in ways that make no sense. Like I just did, where I'm like, I was born in the US, and then I like laughed nervously and clarified in the United States. That's because I'm reading a script. And I was terrified of going off script because like every single second counted. So I had just been in the habit of every time I didn't say what was exactly on my little teleprompter thingy, I would correct myself. And sometimes it's ridiculous. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense. So yes, whenever it might feel like my delivery is a little odd, just know that I'm basically like doing this whole thing off of a very like low-tech homemade teleprompter. Yeah, it was terrifying. It was so stressful. It's just 60 minutes, one take. You can't review it. It's just gone. It's just on their hard drive, and that's what they're going to show during the conference. Um, so yeah, that explains that.
An Atari 800. In the 90s, I absolutely fell in love with games like System Shock and Thief, which
Good
awakened
games.
my passion for game design. I contributed to immersive sim fan sites.
I'm totally gonna do that blah, blah, blah thing Friday when I'm presenting. Um, God, I actually have a it's not a talk that I do publicly. I did it once for a small group. It was like a diversity in video games group, and like these first three bullet points in that presentation is like the first 15 minutes. It's kind of like my life story and how I got into video games. So uh, now that that's completely out of my system, I'm never going to bring it up again. I go over some of these points one more time in the Deathloop conference, and now I'm watching it, and it feels a little cringy. Like, why am I sharing like all this Dana Nightingale lore? Like, come on, just get to the point. But I wasn't used to having an audience. I wasn't used to being able to tell my story. It was really new and exciting. So like, yeah, I want to tell people about playing Zork on my Atari 800 and loving Thief. So it feels goofy to me now, but thinking back to my younger self, it makes perfect sense why I gave like these weird bullet points about my personal history.
Excuse me, I've been practicing so many times today and my whole mouth is
Lost in
messed up.
aware.
I earned a master's degree in architecture in.
Sorry, stopping again. Yeah, I practiced this talk like 3 times that day before this recording, and yes, my voice was destroyed, and yes, it affects how I'm able to give this. So, note to any like future public speakers here: do not practice the day of the presentation. You're gonna destroy your voice. I learned my lesson.
Years later, I joined Arcane as a level designer in Austin, Texas to work on Dishonored. I moved to France 5 months.
Sorry, we're gonna get through this eventually. I promise. I just have to heckle myself. Um, I did not realize how much noise I was making on the microphone. I hope I'm not going to make that type of noise when I'm presenting on Friday. So when I'm presenting on Friday, and I will be like clicking through the slides, if you hear me just absolutely smashing the next slide button on the keyboard, like you're going to be hearing throughout this, please someone let me know. I think I've developed a lighter touch. The microphone's a little further away. But yes, we're going to hear me moving my hands, clapping my hands, smacking my hands on things, smashing the keyboard, hammering the next slide button. It's going to be really annoying and distracting. So warning in advance. The passphrase is keyboard kindness. Yes. My poor keyboard. Is it the same keyboard that I had before? It might be. It might be. It's the same. It's the same shelves. Rearranged it a bit. Displays a bit different. The Dishonored is still there. The Dunwall City Trials is still there.
To this day, finally, I became the campaign designer of Deathloop in 2020. But what's my game dev experience? As a modder, I worked on a bunch of missions for Thief 2, The Metal Age, and a few quest and location mods for Skyrim. As a level designer, I worked on Dishonored's Flooded District, The Loyalists, and Eminent Domain. I worked on the Clockwork Mansion of Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsiders Bank Job. I did some map layouts for Wolfenstein Youngblood and
specifically, I worked on, God, I don't know what they called it in ship. In development, it was called Little Berlin. It was the street map where you have the hospital area, and you have the I think there's like a data archives section, and a few other things. I did early like mission design for that. I came up with the idea of the hospital mission and the data archives mission, and I did the gray box, the blackout, for all of that. The legend from TTLG, yeah. Uh, uh, what was I saying? Right. No, the funny thing that's super different between working at doing level design work at Machine Games versus Arcane is, and I'll get into this a bit in the talk. I totally could have used this as a direct example in the talk, but I didn't. Is the difference between doing like an art pass on the gray box and doing like the Arcane style, which is like very complicated and very different. It's kind of a merging process of the art intentions and level design intentions. But because the Machine Games process is the art pass version, what shipped in Wolfenstein is the art pass on my level design blackout. So in a peculiar way, like when I'm playing through that content in Wolfenstein, I see my fingerprints on that work far more clearly than I might on a Arcane level. And that's just related to a very different approach the two studios have between level design and level art and how those merge together. Level design at Arcane is much more collaborative, which is the whole point of the talk. So that felt very relevant. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I haven't mentioned it on stream yet. I'm actually working on a brand new version of this talk. Well, it started off as a new version of the talk. It's like 60% sequel, maybe 20% straight redo, and the rest like an evolution of the previous version. And that's actually what gave me the idea to revisit it, because I was revisiting it. I was going through the PowerPoint slide by slide, seeing what I wanted to bring into the new version, see what I wanted to redo. So throughout this live react, I will from time to time mention the new version of the talk. It'll be called Aligning Around Level Design. And one of the things that's different is I spend a lot more time talking about like exactly how the level designer and the level artist will bring the work together and to emerge. I touch on it in this version. I touch on it very briefly, but I since then I have felt like that deserves a lot more time and focus. So anyway, let's get back to it. Yeah, the new talk probably, I don't know if or when the new talk will be available online. It could be a couple of years from now. I'll keep that one as like my go-to talk for when if I get invited somewhere, but it'll eventually be online. If a conference doesn't put it online, I'll put it online myself.
Finally, I worked on a part of Deathloop's prototype, Alexis Dorsey's mansion, which is featured in the trailers.
Yeah, Deathloop's not out when I made this. That's crazy. Yeah.
I am currently working on Deathloop's infamous murder puzzle. That said, I've had a very focused career, working almost exclusively in level design.
That mug, that's the mug I got during my interview at Arcane Austin. It's this. I have it on the shelf now. Like they gave this to me when I like flew to Austin to interview with their level design team. I don't use it anymore. It is graduated to a place of honor on the shelf, but it was fun seeing it do a little cameo in this. Oh my god, look at that facial expression. That's amazing. Hello and welcome. Yes, lovely arcane orange.
One studio. Two, if you count Arcane Austin, which you should. So, two studios.
Yes, you should.
This presents a challenge. I do not have the broadest experience. So, I have researched. I've interviewed people from other disciplines with more diverse backgrounds. Before I get started, I'd like to explain who this talk is for and the presentation's goals. It's for people who love great level design, even if they're not level designers, and it's for teams making games which have levels in them. It's also for my friends.
I feel like my "Who is this talk for" section did not deliver any relevant information whatsoever. I mean, it's that text should be on the brief that you read, like when you're deciding to make that talk. I think, looking back, I think it's a little silly that I decided to put that in the presentation. But first time, live and learn.
I'm going to discuss the role many disciplines have in making great levels. I'll explain how Arcane Leon does it, or the lofty goals we try to reach, and ways we could be doing it better. But I also want to put a spotlight on everyone who's helped me make levels places that players enjoy and talk about. All of that while trying to go as in-depth as I can in 60 minutes.
This was this was a talk I had been wanting to give for several years, back when I would daydream about one day maybe doing a conference talk. It was always my idea to do this one. This was what I wanted to talk about, because I felt like enough wasn't being said about all the work that like surrounds level design, that goes into level design to make it possible. And I was like, I was surrounded by unsung heroes. Basically, I had been a couple of years since the Clockwork Mansion, and I would hear stuff like and it's the same with the way a lot of people talk about, like, the director of the games, like the game was made by this one person. The same thing would kind of happen with level design. So like that last point on the previous slide is kind of like the soul of the talk. Of I just wanted to do an entire lecture, like breaking it down and explaining all the different other people who I depend on in order to be able to do my work at all.
I should define what I mean when I say a level. What a level designer at Arcane Leon does, and
Oh, I have a lot of fun with what even is a level in the new talk.
what I feel makes a level great. Yes. When I say a level, I mean one of many segments that the game is divided into, or a location in the game world, or a moment in the player's journey. At Arcane Leon, a level designer is defining the layout.
I'm shaking my head because it's like I had already been a level designer at this point, like professionally, for almost 10 years, and then like as a hobbyist for many other years. And I am so disappointed with my explanation here for what even is a level. I guess you can gain a different perspective when you have to be the leader of the team, and you have to like build arguments to your team. Sometimes when you're too close to something, you can't really explain it. But no, I have a lot more fun with what even is a level in the new talk.
the map, crafting encounters and vignettes with all of the scripted logic that powers them, but most importantly, are part of the creative process. Level designers have authorship of their maps. From my perspective, a great level brings the most out of the game's narrative and systems. It captures the imaginations and desire to engage with the content. It feels like a place or a moment that matters either to the game itself or to the player. And in those truly great cases is something that stays with them after they finish the game. They remember and talk about it. Arcane, as a whole, has a bit of a reputation.
This part was the final addition to the talk. This slide is not my idea. This slide was recommended for me to add, like maybe a day before it was finished. I can't remember who the recommendation came from. Maybe someone in PR, admin, someone within the studio who was reviewing the talk. They're like, you need to spend more time singing Arcane's praises and talking about how much people love our levels. And I'm just like, I don't really want to do that, but they insisted, and like, okay, fair. So my whole cadence changes during this slide, and it's partially because I feel awkward doing it and partially because this was a last minute addition.
For our level design, which a few people think is pretty good. I happen to be a big fan too. I'm extremely proud to be a part of this team and admire their work to bits.
By the way, feel free to ask questions at any time. Don't limit this to me just sharing little goofy details. If you have anything you're curious about, I'm watching the chat. The chat's right there. Jump in at any time you want.
So what's the plan?
Okay, I'm going to heckle myself again, though. That weird obsession that I had while making this talk with the color coding. I felt very clever doing it. I felt like it would mean something. I even color coded myself that top that I'm wearing is meant to be the same color as every time I mention level design in the talk, which I felt brilliant for doing. I'm pretty sure no one noticed, and even the ones who did notice would be like, okay, why? But why? But yeah, looking at it now, it's just so random, but also again, days before I was going to present, someone pointed out to me that, like, that's not going to really work very well for people with color blindness, and I was mortified. I was so upset. Like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. Oh no. And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. Just go with it. I still do play around with color coding in some of my presentations, but I don't do with this like obsession of just, oh, every time I use the word artist, it has to be orange for some reason. That seems incredibly important to my presentation. Yep, no, don't have to wait to the end. Okay, let's keep going.
Admire their work to bits. So what's the plan? Okay,
this gag, this bit is the only I think it's the only joke from this talk that survived into the new talk. But in the new version, I go all in with the bit. Like, I probably take it too far. It's a little mini roast of certain things that I see, certain attitudes that I see. So here I just kind of subtly poke fun. But no, in the new version, I devote a bit more time to this.
The talk is divided into two parts, your team and processes. And each part will look at 4 challenges you're going to face and look at solutions to each one.
Okay, big criticism. This is way too many topics.
The talk is divided into 2 parts, your team and processes.
This is way too many topics. This was too much. This was way too much to tackle for like, first of all, it should not have been a 60-minute talk. I should have wrapped this up at 50 minutes maximum. Secondly, this is way too many topics to try to tackle in a single talk. When I did this, I was certain that this was my one and only shot, that I would never get another opportunity to speak publicly again. So I'm just like, I got to cram everything in here. Everything I want to possibly say about the creation of levels, about game design in general, about existing within the studio, I tried to cram it in. So, um, yeah, hindsight 2020, I had many, many, many more opportunities to speak after this, and I didn't need to cram all these topics into here. But I did, and now we're going to heckle me as I rush through so many of them.
In each part, we'll look at 4 challenges you're going to face and look at solutions to each one. Part 1 is your team. The first challenge is an evolving level design team. On Dishonored, we began with 4 level designers who had been working with us since Dark
Been still with us. Oh wait, no, I'm spoiling. I get to that.
Messiah, and also on Ravenholm, Elemento, and The Crossing. With 8 new level designers, mostly joining from Arcane Austin, this is where I started. I was here. In Dishonored, we brought in 6 new level designers to Arcane Leon because Arcane Austin's LD team began to work on Prey. Death of the Outsider saw 3 new level designers join, and Deathloop added 5 more. Over this decade...
Okay, so the reason why in Deathloop I'm missing that one Dark Messiah level designer is because he became a technical level designer, and I decided not to include him here. But yes, that... actually, no. 2. One was lead LD. When did Yuan Sake join? Was he joining Dark Messiah? We had still plenty of the Dark Messiah level designers with us when we were making Deathloop. They just weren't all working as level designers. And I do get into that later on in the talk, but I kind of wish I had circled back to that point during this section just to talk about, just to reflect on how, like, sometimes our careers can be fluid. Sometimes we can change roles, change positions, like take on the leadership role, stuff like that. So I feel like this slide isn't quite telling the same story. What I'm trying to do here is like build on the idea that like some of the principles that I'm going to get into through this talk can help the team maintain its like identity and processes in way of working, even with some pretty dramatic personnel changes. But I also feel like I didn't quite, I feel like it wasn't quite landing.
Many team members became leads or specialists. Some changed to other disciplines, while others moved to other studios.
Oh, I do say
we
that.
had an influx constantly of new
totally
talent,
said it.
But how do you keep your work consistent if your team keeps changing? It comes down to a clearly defined studio culture, and that's not something that you can just conjure up. The ideal is to build a level design team with a foundation in certain design values. Above all, we are a studio that makes a certain type of game, and we recruit along those values. Level designers come here to work on that type of game. Good level design can't just be a value for the LD team. It must extend to the entire studio. And almost everything in our games is expressed through the level design. The whole studio considers level design as one of the most powerful tools to deliver the experience that we are all after. At Arcane, we never shut up about our design values. We talk about them constantly.
Oh boy, do we not shut up about them. Oh my God, no. We do not shut up.
People are sick of having one brought up as an argument in meetings, but everyone knows them and no one forgets them.
Yeah, she's talking about me here. I'm a little sick of people bringing in arguments. Yes, like, there's I think we need like to name it. We like need to call, what is that? What's that law where it's like any debate, if it goes on long enough, someone is going to get compared to Nazis or something. The Arcane version of that is if any debate goes on for more than, I don't know, 10 minutes, someone's going to bring up the Arcane design values, and it's just going to be, okay, here we go. Yeah. It's okay. We love them. It's how we do. It's how we do it.
for an hour about Arcane's design values, and many people have, but that's not the point of this presentation. The point is that your studio has its own values, and you are the ones defining them. Our second challenge is leadership bottlenecks. What do I mean by bottleneck? In this case, it's when an idea doesn't move forward until it works its way up the bottle. A level designer creates an idea, which is reviewed by their lead, who will give feedback, help them iterate, and ultimately validate it or not. If validated, the producer will evaluate the impact on other teams, even validated at this stage, which again isn't a given.
Say nowhere, that book exists. It is watermarked on every page. Do not distribute. So I'm sorry, I'll probably never be able to share it with you. Best way to view it is to get a job here.
Gets involved, who may be reviewing it without the LD present, they may not feel it fits with the vision of the game and kill it.
I'm one of the co-authors of it. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back a bit.
Isn't a given when the creative director gets involved, who may be reviewing it without the LD present, they may not feel it fits with the vision of the game and kill it. Not only does this weed out a diversity of ideas, but it could also take weeks. So, what's our solution? Eliminate the validation process. No, it's probably not a good idea. Instead, we have a team of leadership. Our level design team does not have a flat hierarchy, but we have several leaders who work together. In addition to the lead, there's the campaign designer, hi, that's me, and the lead technical level designer. Together, we sit down with the level designer and review their ideas, with the campaign producer and the creative director. If one of us can't be present, the process happens anyway. We keep things moving. We involve the LD so they can defend their ideas, which then don't have to be validated over and over. Sometimes we disagree, and that's the point. We have different tastes and areas of expertise. We talk it out. We try to find a consensus or a compromise. And sometimes we just trust the person who's the most qualified to make that call. This means a bigger variety of ideas can make it into the game. Okay, so
I was holding back during that whole section because I'm like, yeah, let younger me finish. Let her say her part before jumping in. I'm probably the least satisfied with that section of everything in this talk. But that makes sense because when I made this talk, I wasn't part of the leadership team. Not really. I mean, I put myself on here as campaign designer, but it wasn't really part of the leadership process. Yeah, I was part of certain aspects of the creative leadership, but just certain aspects. And I really don't feel like what I just went over in any shape or form addressed the problem that I highlight during the whole bottleneck thing of the validation process and the many like points of failure along that chain and how long that process takes. I kind of like do a very, very surface level of like, oh yeah, we all talk about it together and it's cool, but it does not address the problem. And I hate to say all that and then just kind of leave you all hanging, but in the new talk, like this section on leadership, instead of being like a little like 5-minute bit in a 60-minute talk, it's like half the entire presentation, which makes sense. Like part of the reason to revisit it, to redo it, is because now I have several years experience as a director, so I have a very different perspective on leadership organization, leadership styles, leadership practices. So I have a lot of different things to say about it. But yeah, that little bit makes me inwardly cringe a little bit because I identify some really solid problems that like creatives can face when they're dealing with a leadership organization and that validation process, those bottlenecks, and I don't really address them. So that is to be addressed in the future.
What's each of our areas of expertise? Who's the most qualified for what? The lead level designer defines the level design objectives and guidelines. They work closely with systems design and level art. The campaign designer crafts the backbone of the player's experience. They work closely with narrative and UI and user experience. The lead technical level designer is all about the team's tools and processes. They work closely with tools development and tech art.
This is not so clear cut as I'm presenting it. I divide it up into neat little like chunks of 3. Each of us are working with 2 specific people. The reality is much more fluid, much more complicated, but like surface level, it's pretty accurate. It's pretty close. In reality, as campaign director, I am working with creative director, art director, level art director. I'm working less with the technical director, and yes, the lead tech artist is mostly dealing with them. So a lot of this is 100% true, but it is a big oversimplification.
You can see we have a pretty balanced load in terms of what other disciplines we work with, letting each of us focus on our particular area and trusting each other to have our backs for the rest.
We do have each other's backs.
In a nutshell, discuss ideas together as a group, not as rungs in a ladder where each rung could break. We have a variety of leaders with different areas of expertise and different tastes. Include the level designer in the validation process. Let them defend their ideas. Some people can present their ideas better on paper, and some can do it better in a discussion. Give them a chance and keep the process moving. Deference and trust are required. Challenge 3 is masters of none.
So much more that can be said over that entire topic. I know I already babbled about all that, so let's keep going.
There is a huge variety of things a level designer has to be good at. You know, jack of all trades. A level designer creates the map's layout, the challenges, the logic of events, and so much more. Every choice a level designer makes can impact or define the narrative. Every vignette involves a UI or user experience element, whether it's an interaction prompt or an objective notification. Many game systems happen inside the level design. How does the map's design get the most out of those systems? Does the gray box layout match the architectural intentions with the right proportions, scales, and rhythms of spaces? Is the map following all metrics and constraints and optimization guidelines? Is the level designer an expert on every tool, including scripting logic and various forms of markup?
Every time I practice this, I would replicate that exact level of exasperation as I go through this. And honestly, it was like a fully genuine emotion. I didn't have to put on airs to do that. It's exasperating.
This is a lot. And no one person can be an expert at all of it. I know I am not. So, what can we do?
I'm glad you asked. What is a vignette? And actually, in the new talk, one of the people helping me out with it kindly pointed out, Dana, what's a vignette? I'm like, oh yeah, I should explain that. A vignette is it's like one single unit of level design. It is the smallest like bite of experience within like your creation as a level designer. That's still a coherent whole. It's it has the pattern of the player in our games. It's different from game to game, and specifically a level design vignette. The player has a goal, either a goal the game has given them or a goal that they've created for themselves. They have identified an obstacle keeping them from that goal. They understand the tools, abilities, tools both as like the player verbs and presented by the environment that they may be able to use to overcome that obstacle, and then the gameplay associated with then overcoming that and reaching that goal. So like if you take all of that and you can distill it down to like 20 seconds of play, that's a vignette. Or maybe it's like half an hour of play. It could still be a vignette, but it's like one and like it's kind of recursive. You could have vignettes within vignettes. So when I say vignette, that's what I mean. I hope that's clear. somebody who is practicing in level designer in level design. This is oh yeah. I'm glad you think so. Okay, so I hope that is clear. It's it's probably like Arcane Leon lingo. Um, I'm not sure if other studios call that vignette. It's what we call it, but yeah, it's like shorthand for this little piece of content, but like the whole thing. So if it's just like the adversary, that's not a vignette. Like it has to include the goal type thing. No, Alexis's mansion was like 18 vignettes. No, a single vignette in Alexis Dorsey's mansion might be realizing that the beer taps are a thing, identifying where you could go to alter them, understanding that this could impact Alexis's behavior, seeing the obstacle of all the tripwires to get there, overcoming the tripwires, turning off the beer taps, Alexis coming, defeating him. And even in that, I've like that can be broken down further into smaller vignettes. Each individual like goal, challenge, accomplishment is a vignette. So it's kind of recursive. Is recursive the right word? It can be broken down into smaller parts. I feel like I'm using the wrong word. Sure. The courtyard probably, well, the courtyard is one of those vignettes where the player could have any number of different goals. That's one of those cases where that can be very player driven. If the player has their own goal, they want to get there, and there's challenges that are keeping them from that. Yeah, damn that chocolate beer. I don't know if you've had chocolate beer, but honestly, it's fine. Like everyone was making fun of Alexis for liking it. Like if it's someone's favorite beer, then yes, they deserve to be roasted, but it's fine.
The diversification of level design specializations. This is dividing level designers into two types, map owners and specialists.
Mm-hmm.
Specialists ease the...
Okay, I have switched drinking vessels in this video. And I noticed this when I was quickly checking the video to make sure I could show it. I'm like wait a second, how many different things am I drinking from? Because first I had the orange arcane mug, and now I'm drinking from my Blade Runner 2049 tumbler glass. That is like a little precious object of mine. So this is just my favorite little drinking vessels are making cameos in this video.
owners. A narrative scripter is part of the narrative team, but with a level designer's skills, this allows them to autonomously carry out narrative setup in the maps. The campaign designer makes sure the UI is in sync with what the level designers are doing and guides the LDs and how to best take advantage of it. A level systems designer can be one or the other, but has the skills in both. They provide the LDs they provide an LD's insight into the development of some systems and assist LDs in getting the most out of those systems. Level artists work directly with level designers on the geometry. So LDs don't also have to be masters of the fundamentals of architecture, needing to create gray boxes that transition beautifully into realistic buildings. That's not the point of our gray boxes.
It's actually a little better if level designers are not any of that, because you kind of need to get out of the way and let the level artists do their job. When our level designers are a little bit too in love with architecture, it can cause a little like, hey, stay out of my lane type moments. But I have a lot more to say about this slide, but I'm going to wait for it to all be on screen.
Assist in tools development, but also work with level designers on highly technical tasks.
So fun fact about this is some of this isn't true anymore. In fact, some of this was only true very briefly. This slide represents like a transitionary period in our level design team where we were trying some things. We were experimenting with this concept of, like the slide says, these diversification of level design specializations. And in some cases, it was a failed experiment, and sometimes it was an experiment that led to something better, and sometimes it just didn't work out. So, for example, we don't have a narrative scripter anymore, but what we do have is a lot better training for the entire narrative team on how to work in the map. So we don't need like a narrative designer specialist who is the one who's doing all the in-map setup. Any narrative designer can do the in-map setup. We don't have a campaign designer anymore because she's the director now. Level systems designer, fun fact, that was also me. That was something I was trying to do before I became campaign designer. That was an experiment. That was us identifying like a weak point in our collaboration in the way the two teams work together. This concept of having like a hybrid level designer, systems designer. Tried it out for a couple of years. It didn't quite work. Instead, what we did is this is something I'll talk about in the new talk, is this idea of design buddies, where every feature that needs to integrate well into the levels is like part of a level designer's work. It needs kind of like a little mini level systems designer. It needs a design buddy, a level designer who is super well versed in the topic, is giving feedback on it, is helping the systems designer iterate, is helping them prototype, is the one that's holding all the knowledge of it, so level designers know who to ask. So like I said with the narrative scripter, it's like the position doesn't exist anymore, but that responsibility is now in part distributed throughout the level design team. And the same is honestly true with the campaign design. Like as a director, I try to teach every level designer like my ideology and methodology of like mission design and campaign design and how everything's interconnected, so that every level designer can carry like that torch alongside me, instead of it just being like one campaign designer who's doing all the work on the campaign, and then the other level designers are just doing their map ownership work. Technical level designer, massive success. We now have several of them, big damn heroes on the team. That part is just like overwhelmingly the right direction to go. So that at least worked out. But yeah, a few things on this slide no longer represent reality at the studio.
Tools development, but also work with level designers on highly technical tasks. This has helped Arcane so much. It is not necessary for map owners to be experts at everything. There are people on other teams who have level design skills. Let them contribute. But most importantly, be sensitive to what each member of your team needs. They don't all have to be map owners. Let one focus on technical tasks and another work on narrative. Let them focus on their strengths. Challenge 4 is overwhelming dependencies. No discipline works in isolation, and game development has many.
Really intriguing, the concept of the narrative scripter while aiming to achieve a position as a narrative designer. I wish I could also work as level design. The narrative scripter was, honestly, the narrative scripter was really more like the tech LD for the narrative team. So they weren't actually doing narrative design or level design. They were doing tech LD work, but they were doing it as part of the level designer. So I'm not sure that that's the role you're after, the Arcane Slayer. Someone who is collaborating very closely with narrative while doing level design work is probably, that's more of like a mission designer type role. Not sure. Was Sebastian also overseeing the design stuff? As Sebastian Mitton is art director, and he would collaborate closely with Dinga on like on the intersection between art and design. But like Sebastian is not in like level design. He wouldn't be in like design meetings or like review design work. He's more building the central vision of what the game is, and a lot of that implies design with Dinga. He will be in many of the meetings that I'm in because those are like director meetings and all the directors are present. But like, as far as design work, no, he stayed pretty focused on the art aspects. Okay, so this next section, this overwhelming dependencies, um, this pair becomes kind of like the heart and soul of the new talk, rather than it being like one chapter out of, like I say, there's 8 chapters on the table of contents. There's secretly 9. Um, this part becomes kind of the backbone of the entire presentation for the new talk. And stuff like what I just talked about of the different ways a level designer can do their work, that's all fully integrated into this next section. And yeah, so let's go.
Many moving parts. The whole design must work with nearly all of them. But what does that look like?
Key partnerships.
What are a level designer's key partnerships?
The longest part of the talk, and in the new talk, it is the entire talk.
First, what is the work that happens before level designers begin? What allows them to do their work? In defining the shape and scope, many questions have to be asked. The broadest one is, what does a level even mean in our game? Are the levels connected by ellipses or are they contiguous? How big are the maps? How dense are they? Do several maps make a level, like we had in Dishonored? Or is it something else entirely, like we're...
I felt so clever for using the word ellipses here. It's a bit pretentious.
It's critical that the technical director and level designers are in sync with creative direction and art direction. If they're not, be careful. What feels like the final decision can change, and it will be painful if it does.
See, I always pause it a second too late. That's an example of like the way the new talk structure is all based on this section. What I was just talking about had everything to do with what I was discussing before, with like the whole leadership bottlenecks angle of, if you have this very linear process of ideas having to work their way up this chain of command before the right people's eyes get on them, you run afoul of what I was just like highlighting in the previous slide of like, oh, there's this tremendous idea among the team and they work on it for X number of days, weeks, or months, and then finally a director sees it and they're like, what the fuck is this? This doesn't fit our game. It's something that has to be confronted as part of the leadership organization. It's so important. So important.
Developers have a hand in laying the foundation for the ways LDs and level artists do their work, or what work is even possible at all. To ensure that these tools fit the needs and processes of both teams, tech LDs and tech artists are involved early. Tools are created.
Tech artists are one of the unsung heroes of game development. If you know a tech artist, find them and hug them.
Workflows are mapped out.
First, ask permission, hug consensually.
Best practices are defined. Now LDs and level artists have exactly what they need. Tools that are concretely designed for the exact work they're doing. Now and then we try to do something wacky, like Dishonored 2's time travel mission, Crack in the Slab, or the Clockwork Mansion. Our engine and tools teams...
Those are actually really bad examples because those were 2 things that were done in full alignment with all teams from like day one. What I'm really talking about here is a level designer decides to do something nobody asked for. That's what I'm really talking about here.
Make our dreams come true. But we don't just use tools to build maps, we also need to implement game systems. Technical LDs will work alongside the systems designer.
Okay, I just realized I needed to back that up with a solid example. So in Deathloop, you have those candy machines, right? And you can shoot them and all the candy comes out and then the characters slip and fall on them. That idea came purely from level design. If you know Julien Nevier, then you already know this story. He's told it many times. That's the kind of thing where it's like wacky idea from the level design side, absolutely unsupported on any level by any team, but it's a cool idea. So they're like, okay, how do we make this work? We don't have any like this. This is art. This is sound. This is physics. This is this in Deathloop. It's also replication across a network. So that's scary, but yeah, that's a much better example of what I'm talking about there than like cracking the slab. Like no, cracking the slab, like that's foundational to the game. That's like day zero design doc is cracking the slab. Like, come on. Like our tech is built to support cracking the slab.
In a mix of engine developers and gameplay programmers. The work done by these teams is critical to making immersive sims. Void Studio is built from the ground up for exactly this type of game. We've created a visual scripting language called Kiskul, tailored exactly to our needs and the needs of the games we're making. We have a modular component system that ensures behaviors are consistent game-wide, which is a key to systemic game design. We have external tools like a content integration system or performance monitors, but we sometimes like to give them funny names like Octung that delivers warnings, or Tintin, our bug reporter.
We have very goofy and clever people on our team who get to name our tools. Kiskul is also like an in joke, but I do not remember what the joke is.
Forging the Golden Path is where I come in. Our games are very narrative driven, but narrative and gameplay are one. What the story is and what the player can or must do are intertwined. This forms the campaign. The campaign designer will collaborate closely with narrative team, lead level design, and creative direction to form the high-level outline of the player's goals. They then collaborate with the LDs to turn this outline into detailed scenarios, challenges, and vignettes.
When I had made this talk, I had not done this yet. My predecessor had done this. Christophe Carrier was the campaign director before me. So right now I'm describing his work on Dishonored, Dishonored 2, Death the Outsider, Deathloop, etc. But it's work that I'm doing now.
The game world is fleshed out from a collaboration between level design, narrative, and art direction. A level design problem can lead to a solution that makes the game's world richer. Once narrative and art get a hold of it, what was a problem now fleshes out the world. In Dishonored, we wanted urban maps, which implies streets, but we also didn't want to put up invisible walls. So art and narrative invented massive street blockers, which fictionally controlled the spread of the plague, but also enclosed the gameplay space. A narrative designer.
I actually didn't know that when I made the talk. That was a story someone told me when I was like I said early on, I was doing research for the talk, so it actually like hunt people down and get them to give me like cool anecdotes of like, hey, how does give me a cool story about how a collaboration with this team impacted developments, and they shared the street blocker story. I think that came together before my time. I joined Dishonored 1 dev. They had maybe already been working on it for a year before I started. And the street blockers were already like a thing that existed in the game. So it was fun to hear how that originated from a really organic collaboration between level design and art. And at the time, narrative design on Dishonored was mostly handled by Harvey Smith and a few of the more senior level designers. That was basically the narrative team. But yeah, we didn't officially have a narrative team, but we did in spirit.
Something surprising. A concept artist runs with it, exciting everyone, leading to a level designer creating a vignette or maybe an entire level around it. But this can only happen if each team member and feels free to collaborate. Now we're in the thick of it. What key partnership come into play while the level geometry is being made? The crafters of the maps may be our most important partnership. The level designer and level artist will begin work at the same time. The LD creates the layout and flow of the maps in Graybox. which establishes the size, scope, paths, basically what the level is.
A fun fact, we don't use the term gray box anymore because every level designer who joins us has a very different idea of what a gray box is, and that can cause problems. You need common language that means the exact same understood thing. So sure, level designers can create gray boxes, but we consider those part of your personal process. The thing you're actually delivering as part of your work, we call it something else. I talk about that in the other talk. But most people understand what a gray box is, so it makes sense to say it here. Actually, when I gave this talk, we were still calling it a gray box and constantly running into the issue of every level designer have a very different idea of what a gray box even was. That's tricky. When you say something, you need everyone to understand the exact same definition.
Creates the visual DNA of the map. This proof of concept establishes the scale and proportions, the style and the mood. Once both plans are validated, these two join forces. The level artists are not doing
massive oversimplification. Just overwhelmingly, I'm skipping over so much stuff, but like I said, new talk is better.
An art pass on the maps. They're creating a new map from scratch based on the LD's layout, but with the visual DNA of their proof of concept. Pairs of level designers and level artists will work together until the end of the project, collaborating to bring their combined vision to reality. Level artists work closely with environment artists to establish a modular system called a breakout kit that can be snapped together.
Environment artists work closely with basically every other discipline in the entire studio.
These are intended to be replaced with authored assets late in production during the polish stage. Level designers also work with environment artists to create unique props. This can be a complicated process involving concept art and level art as well, and can require a lot of iteration since this piece may be part of a puzzle that players need to understand just by looking at it.
There's a little bit of trauma behind this section. I'm talking very specifically about the Jindosh electroshock therapy vignette, which had to go through many iterations, and it was really painful because every time the design changed, the art had to change, and it was, oh god, that was not fun. God, because you want to be able to iterate quickly, you want to be able to change things. You want to be like, okay, this isn't working. Let's try it this way. Let's modify it in this direction. Oh no, we already have finished art. We can't just tweak it that way. Okay, we have to wait X number of weeks for that artist to be able to do an art update to test our idea. Okay, they did it. Does it work? No, it's even worse now. Oh shit, what do we do now? Yeah, it's a nightmare. We got through it.
The moving bank vault in Death of the Outsider was constructed by someone who could do both concept art and environment art. Concept artists will
Every environment artist can also do concept art. I don't know why I said it like that. If someone is doing, okay, that's not fair. Not every environment artist likes doing concept art, but they're all capable of it. I mean, they're artists. They can conceive things. They can. I mean, there was one instance where I worked with someone who was working in both roles, but I feel like I'm not really like hitting on the reality of of that profession. Honestly, can't even imagine the stress. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, I'm still here, so it hasn't defeated me.
absolutely become involved to visualize the spaces, doing paintovers of the gray box or the level artist's rough blockout. Sometimes this can bring out new ideas, with the concept artist providing a vision neither map owner had anticipated. Practically speaking, it is
I say sometimes, but the truth is, it's always. I mean, that's their job. Their job is literally to bring ideas that no one else is thinking of. So I'm like, sometimes here, replace that with literally every time.
It's useful to define the details that the environment and lighting artists will use. Other times it's just exciting. You get to see what the map could look like in the finished game, possibly years before the art and rendering are ready to make it possible. It can be an inspiring moment that invigorates the passions of everyone involved.
It is fucking sick.
We require illumination. Our level design and level art wouldn't mean much without lighting. How would the players see once a map's layout is stable? A lighting
Apparently, I found that "How would the players see" joke very funny back in 2001. Your mileage may vary.
3 will work together. A map's lighting could be subtle and functional, there but never thought about, or it can be emotional, heavily pushing the desired mood, or it can be directional, giving the player critical information, guiding them forward. The lighting artist will use all of these methods to make the map shine. Pun intended. Environmental storytelling is
Always intend your puns. That's one of my life goals. Just never make an unintended pun. Just always intend them. And even if you didn't intend them, own them. Just accept them. Like, yeah, I intended that pun.
exist in all spaces in the game, expressed either explicitly or left to inference. It has 2 forms. High level is, why does this space exist? Why is this place like this? It is often conceived by the narrative team, creative direction, and level art leadership. This forms the core concept of a location. Low level is, what happened here? What do these objects communicate to the player? Low level comes from all directions, often proposed by the narrative team, but just as often from the level designers or the level artists. Constructing the level geometry is now well in progress, but we're making games. What about the gameplay? What about taking a drink? Because my throat is getting worn out.
I was just thinking, I sounded like I was in a lot of pain in this moment.
Just as we have emergent gameplay,
I switched to orange
we
juice.
have emergent level design. Our level designers have a lot of freedom to invent wild bullshit. The work done by the systems designer and gameplay programmers allows LDs to invent novel, weird, or just plain game-breaking stuff they create new uses for everything. It's not uncommon for an LD to
I lost my place in the script. Oh no. I knew exactly what I was saying, but I panicked because I couldn't find where on my little makeshift teleprompter I was supposed to be reading. Yes, spaghetti pile. I am one of those level designers who obsessively tries to make everything look pretty, so I never make spaghetti piles, even if it is ridiculously complicated. My script is gorgeous.
push the envelope with our tools and create a spaghetti pile of logic just to get it working. Yes, I am very guilty of this. I think it's great, but we still must be careful. This is when tech LDs and gameplay programmers and systems designers get involved. It could be coded into a fully supported new feature. This is a best case scenario for everyone, and it happens very often. It could be cleaned up.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, the candy on the floor example. I don't think that had even happened yet when I put this talk together, but it's a pretty handy go-to example of this kind of thing.
Even without code support, a specialist can do a lot with our tools in either outcome. It can become a nightmare for QA. This is especially true if they come across what looks like a new feature, but there's no documentation and no metrics, and the only person who even knows it exists is the level designer who cobbled it together. Player 4.
Part of the problem with that is that half the time when that happens to folks in QA, it actually is an official feature. And there also is no documentation for it. And now they're stuck. Now they have a problem. Be kind to your QA folks. They are lifesavers. They fucking rock. So do everything you can to help them do their job, and they'll help you do yours. So a little PSA about QA there.
is near and dear to our heart.
Oh, this is funny. I had actually forgotten that I had done this in the old talk because in the new talk, I bring up this if it looks doable, let the player do it. And I have a very different outlook on this topic now in 2024. I'll save the rest of that for if you get to see. You should be able to see the future talk someday. But I attack this topic very differently in the new talk, but I had forgotten that I did this in the old talk. It's kind of funny. It's funny to me now because I'm just on completely the other side of the topic back in 2021.
Expressed simply, if it looks doable, let the player do it. But also, if we can't let the player do it, don't let it look doable. This is expressed through a union of environment art, level art, and systems design. Level designers will define rules about what looks interactive or what looks traversable. Can I fit into that tunnel? Can I open this door? It looks like I can. Systems design will set the player's expectations for combat tactics, like how big of a gap can an enemy see through, or what counts as cover and what doesn't. Environment artists interpret these guidelines, but they're often the start of the conversation. They may want to make a certain type of asset, like a box of fireworks. Well, if the player shoots it, they'll expect it to explode.
Very Deathloopy example.
We achieve a narrative rooted in gameplay through level design, systems design, and narrative design, bouncing ideas off each other, letting them evolve. Here's one example. Narrative decides that the protagonist should have a personalized weapon that expresses their themes. In Death of the Outsider, Billy Lurk had a voltaic gun that represented her unconventional methods and pragmatic ingenuity. Systems design devises a unique ammo type, pencils and pens. Level design could then have you visiting locations where pens and pencils are laying around. Say, why not a bank?
This makes a fun story in the talk, but it actually didn't even happen this way at all. It was more a series of happy accidents. I don't know who I'm throwing under the bus by talking about this. There were a lot of happy coincidences involved in this design. I'm making it sound like it was all planned. That is just like conceived from the start of how it was going to work. No, not at all. It was much more chaotic than this. It's really cool how well it came together in the end. Just like thematically, how it fit, how it all aligned. But in actual practice, nothing's ever that simple.
It can move in the other direction. Level design creates a puzzle. There's a button that you have to shoot. Systems design invents a rubber bullet that can impact silently and then be recovered. Narrative design brings that tool into the game's world. I think it was part of a fish. But players can't read our mind.
River crust. It was part of a river crust. Wait, was it? I don't really remember. But yeah, that whole sequence is me painting a very pretty picture about something that was actually very chaotic and messy during game development. Really cool outcome, though. I'm happy with how it came together, but it was not that tidy at all.
The game has to communicate possibilities in play. What is allowed and what is needed to progress. The campaign designer will work with level designers to transmute their designs into communication via the user interface.
Transmute?
This can take a lot of forms, like objective texts or markers on the HUD, a quest journal, or failure states.
Reminds me of the time when Arcane blocked the ceiling gap above Hangar 2 in Carl's Bay. Didn't we go back and unblock that after? That was a bug fix, and it turned out that was by design. Like that somehow that I no, how did that go? I think there was like a global bug fix to collisions that as a side effect, as a result, blocked off that. But that was like explicitly designed for the purpose of letting the player like peek through there and shoot through it. And then it got closed off. And yeah, we patched it to fix it. But yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah, I think that actually came up during when I was streaming the game. Well, I hope that explanation satisfies you. Sometimes things happen by accident.
The narrative team is involved from the start, weaving story through objectives and doing the final writing pass. So now the map exists.
Yeah, that one slide is like a huge part of the Deathloop talk that I'm giving on Friday. The whole like what is the campaign designer's work? I discovered during the speedrun reaction you guys did on IGN. You discovered that it was possible? I guess the speed run was done after we had fixed it. I don't remember the timeline there. I just know that when we shipped, there was a collision blocking that off. But it was no. Okay, good. Yeah, it was that was designed to be possible.
A static map is not an immersive map. What brings the maps to life?
Oh, same glass.
Sound designers, VFX artists, and animators work directly in our maps to create vibrant, reactive living places using the same tools as the LDs. These team members are artists and designers and may see a way to do something a bit differently than what the LD asked for, who doesn't have the same eye for this kind of work. In the Clockwork Mansion, the electroshock sequence was pitched as being quite subtle. These three teams punched up the intensity over and over, both trying to reward the player with a dramatic outcome and drive home the horror of what you were doing. This couldn't happen.
It was horrible what you were doing. I think we can all agree that it was horrible what you were doing. I don't think that's a controversial statement. It was horrid. It was awful. Makes me feel icky.
A list of assets with no context and no say in how they're used. There's a deep symbiosis between systems design and animators. Together, they bring the NPCs to life, but shit gets real when level designers are involved. The level design could be causing trouble for NPCs. The player could often be crouched inside a low tunnel, leaving enemies baffled, even though they're within reach. Animators could step in and create a new set of animations to solve this. Level designers could need to convey something about the area, maybe a dust storm.
I think that's something that we did on Dishonored 2. It was actually a really complicated setup. Yeah, I feel like I could connect this back to the markup section, but no, that was. I think it involved. God, yeah, that was a pretty complicated setup, if I remember. But it was like one day we all get the task to add all this new markup to under all of our tables and desks and crawl spaces and tunnels, so that if the player's right on the edge and the enemy's there, they could attack. Could they do that in Dishonored 1 as well? I feel like it was a Dishonored 2 thing. Yeah, that's a little horror story.
Has started, which is hazardous to the player. The animators have the NPCs bracing themselves and shielding their eyes, making it clear without exposition. Animators can push hard on certain behaviors, taking it beyond what was proposed. Our games have a feature we call distractions.
There's so many cases in our games where, sure, I say level design system. Excuse me. Yes, I say level and systems design here, but I think even just like the scene on paper can be like, it exists. You have the emotional beats, you have the context, you have the characters and their motivations and how they feel about each other. And then when you see what the animators have done with it, it's just like 200% of what was on paper. They're really good at that, of just being like, they'll look at it and they'll see it and they'll identify all these incredible ways to just push it so much farther than what was planned. They're very good at what they do.
Where NPCs move off their patrols to do a trivial action. A handful of them would do, but our animators create dozens and dozens. In a vivid and tactile world, so much is communicated through sound. A button is modeled and animated, but sound is what it makes it feel like you pressed it. There's that click, and then the machine roars to life, or maybe it gives a dull, empty sound in a crackle. Maybe there's something about the sound that tells you the machine needs power or is broken, or if it does turn on, it will only stay on for a short time. Sound can communicate in intuitive ways, instinctive ways that are faster.
This is all very true and all very important, but remember accessibility. Remember, you have to communicate in more than one way. You can have the most brilliant, beautiful, subtle, tactile, nuanced sound design imaginable, and the sound designers are going to do amazing things there, but always include a second mode of communicating all those ideas. Accessibility is critical to the work we do. Don't leave any player behind. And also, I love the word crackle. This is a good word.
And more intuitive than a UI prompt or the player character explaining things. So much of what you see can also be heard. Atmosphere is equally visual as auditory. Tech artists and rendering engineers create visceral experiences with the sound designers. The gentle hum in the background, perfectly matching the haze surrounding you. The crunching under your feet, letting you feel the shaders on the ground. The player will feel like they're there. The map is now a place. Details tell a story. Light touch VFX can deepen the player's involvement in what the LDs and level artists have built. You could add flies over a trash can next to a door to tip the player off that that house isn't abandoned and something fishy is going on in there. Beams of light through cracks in the ceiling.
I'm not sure that flies over a trash can actually signal that the house isn't abandoned. I don't know about you, but that's an example that was given to me. But just thinking about it logically, would that signal to the player, oh, that's an abandoned house, I see flies? No, flies are like, they would actually like do the opposite. Anyway, I'm nitpicking. That's why we're here, right? To nitpick.
That your long journey back to the surface has come to an end. Maybe this is an exciting moment of relief or a weary, somber moment. The way the beams of light move can push either feeling. A cloud of dust could appear when moving an object, deepening the feeling of intruding upon a forgotten place. Details like these aren't just immersive, they carry information the player can learn or understand without realizing that they have. And finally, how does all of this work? How do you get this work into the player's hands? How do we get there? Someone
Big
has
damn
to keep
heroes.
the ship afloat, and eventually you need to ship. Our testing teams are divided between quality assurance and dev testing. Typically, QA testers will be assigned maps or parts of the campaign and switch every few months to keep ideas fresh. A dev tester will attend each weekly level design meeting, so their dev team always has the latest info on what the LDs are up to. Big, complex features that are tied deeply to level design may get special focus from a dev tester who will attend the kickoff meeting and provide feedback. Players usually like all of the frames per second. Optimization is both the first and last thing our tech.
Boy, do they. Like, show of hands, who loves all the frames per second? I know I do. Frame rates are very important. I maybe sound a little salty here, but don't worry. I'm totally in the pro all the frames per second camp.
Technical teams work on in a production.
Yes.
Our game systems are CPU heavy. So from day one, everything is designed with optimization in mind. This impacts the scope and density of our maps. If you run afoul of this, you may need to split your map in 2 or 3 or 4. And that's harder than it sounds.
Can we name the 4 maps? Are the 4 maps in the room with us now? Let me think. Flooded streets, refinery, a central Rudshore, and Rudshore Gate. There we go. The 4 maps. That was all once one map. That was traumatic.
Define how many active AI can be at a location at once.
Oh yeah, and now here we are at Alexis Dorsey's mansion. It's like, wait, how many people? I have to make it feel like a party with how many characters? What? Seriously? We made it work. We did it. We got there.
Tricks to limit this invisibly without making the maps feel empty. Sightlines are one of the fundamental tools of level design, and rendering metrics determine.
Division? You mean splitting the map? Okay, I think you mean splitting the map, so I'll clarify. Dishonored 1 shipped on, I guess, was it PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360? I hope I got that right. Those systems have RAM. The level has to be loaded into the RAM. Therefore, there's a limit how much you can load at once. So if the map is too big, you have two options. One is just cut, like this, kill it, throw it in the trash, or find a way to split the map in two. So you divide the map. So now, I believe the first division was between flooded district and like the flooded district gate area. I think is the first place where we split it. And then we realized that we had to split off Dowd's base into its own map, and then finally the refinery area was split to its own map. In each one of those cases, it was like we can either strip out like 20 to 40% of this map to get it to fit into RAM, or we can find a way to cut it in two. And we usually chose the second option. Okay, I'm glad that clarified. It that was mostly a Dishonored 1 and a DLC problem. We didn't really have to deal with that much at all afterwards. Yeah, I think after like Knife of Dunwall, Brigmore Witches, we were kind of freed from that constraint, which is really cool. That was an oppressive constraint of just being like, oh no, the map is too big. What do we strip out? Was the whole level just cut into 4? Or was it overhauled to become 4? Each cut happened one at a time. Yeah, it was piecemeal. I maybe there's a delay between the chat and what I'm saying, but first the gate was cut off, like the whole gate area, the arena with the tall boys, and the gate in the plague wagon that was cut off, and then we divided Dowd's base area into its own map, and then we divided the refinery into its own map, and each one of those splits was, I don't know, 6 months apart. If I had to do it over again, I would have just known in advance that that was a thing we were going to have to do and designed it around those map loads. But we don't get the opportunity to go back in time and redo things like that. If anyone wants to do a remake of Dishonored, call me.
Our systemic world and complex AI don't leave much CPU power left for our scripted logic. We can only use 2% of the CPU's power per frame. As production draws to a close, level designers and artists often must hand their maps over to the optimization gods and pray.
Yeah, I understood.
To recap, a clearly defined studio culture can give level designers a consistent quality and style, no matter how your team evolves. A team of leadership with unique roles can open wide the creative potential of the level designers to keep their ideas flowing.
I'm going to heckle myself again right here. I find it very amusing that I decided to break the talk down into two conclusions. Like, I understood, even as I was giving this talk, that it was too many topics. So I actually did the conclusion, the thing that's supposed to happen at the end, at the halfway point, because even then I understood that the talk was way too long and I'm covering way too many topics and I have to add a conclusion at the halfway point. Even if the game has aged well. Oh yeah, I agree. Dishonored 1 has aged very well. It's been many a year since I've played it, but whenever I see it being played, I'm just like, yeah, we did a pretty good job. Yeah. Okay, let's continue with what should be the end of the talk, but is actually just the halfway point where I'm giving a conclusion to half the talk.
The diversification of LD specializations means not every map owner has to be great at everything. Specialists can strengthen the entire team by being very good at one thing. Key partnerships are essential to this deeply collaborative process. Every team has a part to play in making the level design great. And the more everyone understands everyone else's part, the clearer these interactions become. Okay, we're exactly at the halfway point.
I don't know why I have a question. Like, I really was all in on the fact that this is a potential ending to the talk, and then I go on for another 30 minutes. But in the new version, yeah, this is where the talk ends. Oh, thank you.
30 minutes, 31 minutes. At this moment, I have to stop recording the video and start the next section. So I'll see you on the other side of that. Okay.
Oh my god, yeah, I forgot. They made us record and submit it in 2 chunks. Like, what was going on? It was so awkward. Okay, now we're at part 2, processes. Are you ready? Are you all ready for part 2? Should I take a break? I don't want to take a break. Let's keep going.